An alarm clock blares at 6:30 in the morning. Shoutaru wakes up in bed to find a silver-haired woman leaning over him. She greets him with a good morning. He is shocked to realize his new stepmother has already arrived. In a memory from years ago, young Shoutaru sits crying in a park at night. His mother finds him and calls out his name, relieved to have located him. Shoutaru tells her through his tears that his grandmother forbid him from crying and told him not to come home until he won. His mother comforts him, explaining that everyone has been worrying about him. Sitting together in the park, his mother tells him to remember to call for her whenever he is struggling or having a tough time. She pulls him into a hug and promises that she will always come to save him no matter where he is or what he is doing. She tells him to stop crying and playfully boasts that she is the strongest. Shoutaru looks up at her, surprised by her claim. Shoutaru lets out a final relieved sob. His mother tells him it is time to go home. She holds him close as he continues to cry into her chest. As the dream shifts, Shoutaru agrees to leave, but a hand suddenly bursts from the ground and grabs his arm. Shoutaru screams for his mother to wait and not leave him. He is held down and pulled back as she walks away into the darkness. Shoutaru bolts upright in his bed, screaming for his mother. He wakes up gasping and covered in sweat. He flops back onto his pillow and tries to catch his breath. He realizes it was just a dream and sighs over the fact that he shouted for his mom. Shoutaru puts his hands together and says good morning to a photo of his mother. It has been 11 years since she passed, and he is frustrated that he still cries over that recurring dream. Shoutaru suddenly stops and realizes that it is Monday. He panics as he remembers his grandmother is returning from her trip today. He realizes he has to clean the entire house immediately, or she will be furious with him. Shoutaru finishes vacuuming and wipes his forehead. He is relieved to have finished his chores, including preparing his bento, doing the laundry, and taking out the trash. The doorbell rings, catching Shoutaru by surprise. He assumes his grandmother has arrived early from her trip and calls out to her as he goes to open the door to welcome her home. Instead of his grandmother, Shoutaru finds a tall woman with silver hair standing at the entrance. He stares at her in shock. He asks for her identity. She greets him formally and asks if he is Shoutaru, leaving him even more confused. A team of movers begins carrying boxes into the hallway. The woman instructs them to leave the deliveries on the first floor while Shoutaru looks on, overwhelmed by the sudden activity. The woman notes that she has yet to introduce herself. Stacked boxes quickly fill up the living room area next to the sofa. She introduces herself as Shurajiku and explains she was sent by his grandmother. She admits she has no experience with house duties and might have some shortcomings. As she ties a maid apron over her clothes, she explains that his grandmother entrusted her with his care. She tells him that she is his new mother. Shoutaru is stunned by the claim. He asks for clarification on what she means about replacing his grandmother. She hands him a piece of paper as evidence. She explains that his grandmother is having trouble returning to the country and sent her to the house in her stead. Shoutaru verifies that the letter is written in his grandmother's handwriting and includes her signature. He reads that he should treat this woman as a member of his family, though the sudden change is hard for him to process. He checks the clock and realizes he is running late. He struggles to understand the woman's weird behavior and her connection to his grandmother, feeling completely overwhelmed. He grabs his school bag and prepares to leave. He tells her to stay in the house and avoid doing anything while he is gone before heading out the door. Later at school, Shoutaru slumps over, feeling drained. He regrets running away from the strange situation at home so abruptly. He realizes it was reckless to leave his house to a total stranger regardless of the letter she carried. A classmate surprises Shoutaru and asks if he is dealing with a romance issue. Shoutaru dismisses the idea, insisting his problem is far more pressing. He snaps at the student to stop comparing him to a womanizer. Several girls gather around Shoutaru as one notices a hole in his sock. She offers to take the sock and repair it right there. Shoutaru tells them to leave him alone and insists he is not trying to get attention. Shoutaru's classmate watches him from a distance and notes how his behavior stands out. The classmate tells Shoutaru that he behaves exactly like a mother. Shoutaru reacts with shock to the comparison. The classmate accidentally pricks his finger while sewing and apologizes for bringing up a sensitive topic. Shoutaru returns home hoping the woman has already left. He is shocked to find Shurajiku waiting for him in a revealing outfit consisting of a shirt, tie, and an apron. She greets him and welcomes him home. Shoutaru covers his eyes in a panic. He shouts at her, demanding to know what she is wearing. Shurajiku calmly asks if there is an issue with her appearance. Shoutaru panics and yells at her to stop when she begins to lift her apron. Shurajiku notes that her research suggests nearly all high school boys would enjoy this situation. Shoutaru frustratedly argues that her logic is flawed, and there are countless problems with what she is doing. Shurajiku asks Shoutaru to take care of his clothes before entering further into the house. Shoutaru is confused by the sudden request. Shurajiku insists that stripping down is a necessary precaution to avoid bringing in viruses or tracking devices. She commands him to take his clothes off immediately. Shoutaru is baffled by her paranoia about tracking devices. Shoutaru wonders what is happening as Shurajiku pulls him close. She explains that a mother's responsibility is to provide care when a child is exhausted from school. Shoutaru finds himself pressed against Shurajiku's lap. He momentarily notes how soft she feels before catching himself and reminding himself that her physical comfort is not the main issue. Shurajiku mentions she heard his mother and grandmother used to give him lap pillows. Shoutaru snaps back, asking how long ago she thinks that was. Shurajiku looks down at Shoutaru with a blank expression while she continues to hold him in her lap. Shoutaru admits that he cannot relax in this position. He finds the entire situation far too stimulating to settle down. Shurajiku explains that physical contact is important for a mother and child at any age. She mentions that her manual claims lap pillows have proven effects on fatigue recovery. Shoutaru is confused by the mention of a manual. She tells him she expects the effects to kick in soon. Shoutaru suddenly feels an overwhelming sense of drowsiness coming over him. In a dream, a woman asks Shoutaru if he fell asleep again and tells him it is almost dinner time. Shoutaru groggily wonders if it is his mother. Shoutaru wakes up on the couch and realizes he actually fell asleep. He thinks about how he suddenly felt extremely tired for some reason. Shurajiku brings a bowl of curry, telling Shoutaru it is his favorite. Shoutaru notes how good it smells and realizes how long it has been since he had someone else's home cooking. Shoutaru decides he should eat some since she went through the effort, though he tells himself he could have made his own. Shurajiku asks Shoutaru to open wide. She cites her manual, claiming the food becomes 15 times tastier if she feeds it to him. Shoutaru tells her to wait as he panics at the request. Shoutaru insists he can eat by himself, but Shurajiku tells him not to resist. She puts a spoonful of food into his mouth and tells him to eat up. Shoutaru begins to chew and looks surprised. After tasting the curry, Shoutaru realizes it is genuinely delicious. Shoutaru is stunned that the food tastes exactly like home. He wonders how she knew to use their secret ingredient, a biquinho pepper. Shurajiku asks him for his opinion on the meal. Shurajiku explains that she was specifically trying to recreate the taste of a mother's cooking. Shoutaru is left speechless by her comment. Shoutaru reluctantly admits the food is tasty, which pleases Shurajiku. He suddenly gets defensive and shouts that his own curry is just as good, telling her not to think she has one yet. While doing laundry, Shoutaru admits she is good at cooking but refuses to accept her. He tells himself he has the advantage of being on his home turf and insists he is better at every other chore. Shoutaru finishes cleaning the bathroom and catches his breath. He is interrupted by a notification that his bath is already ready. He wonders what the point of their contest even is. Shurajiku tells Shoutaru to get out of the way. Shoutaru feels like he is completely at her mercy and worries that the household order he has maintained for 12 years is being taken over. Shoutaru questions his grandmother's reasoning and concludes that living together with Shurajiku is a terrible idea. While trying to clear his head in the bath, Shoutaru is startled when Shurajiku calls out his name from nearby. Shurajiku explains that her manual identifies washing a child's back as a mother's duty, though Shoutaru tells her to give him a break. Shoutaru asks if the manual mentions the sensitivity of high school boys, but he is suddenly distracted by the sight of scars on Shurajiku's body. Shurajiku claims to be physically stronger than most people and commands Shoutaru to sit still so she can finish quickly. Shurajiku places her hands firmly on Shoutaru's shoulders to keep him in place. Shurajiku tells Shoutaru to relax for their mother and child bonding right, but Shoutaru continues to protest the situation. Shoutaru finds the experience intense as Shurajiku hits a pressure point, realizing she has a very skewed understanding of motherhood. Shurajiku accidentally scratches Shoutaru, causing him to scream out in pain. Shoutaru yells at Shurajiku that he didn't need her help and storms off to go to sleep. Shurajiku watches him leave and looks sadly at a photo on her phone, admitting that she cannot perform the role as well as the person in the picture. Later that night, Shoutaru is unable to sleep and wonders how long their living arrangement will last, while he fails to reach his grandmother by phone. Shoutaru decides that Shurajiku is not a bad person even if she lacks a sense of personal space, just as the door to his room begins to open. Shoutaru starts to complain about being disturbed while he is trying to sleep, but a masked intruder enters and strikes him in the head with a crowbar. A second intruder scolds his partner for hitting the kid out of nowhere, but the first man claims he did it by accident because he was shocked. One of the burglars grabs Shoutaru and calls him a spoiled brat. They realize they are lucky to find a huge house with only one kid inside and plan to take full advantage of the situation. One of the intruders hears a voice and suspects something is wrong. Suddenly, one of their companions is taken out with a scream, leading the others to wonder why the man they left on watch is failing his duty. Shurajiku emerges from the shadows looking down at the incapacitated burglar she has already defeated. Shurajiku remarks on the late-night visitors while dragging the first intruder by his hood. One of the other burglars asks who she is, and she tells him how discourteous he is. The other burglars ask what is going on and mock their friend for being beaten by a single woman. One of them draws a knife to confront her. Shurajiku easily catches the intruder's wrist before he can strike, leaving him completely shocked by her speed. Referring to a page in her manual about a regulation fit, Shurajiku delivers a devastating blow to the attacker. The intruder collapses while Shoutaru and the remaining men watch in total disbelief. Another burglar charges at Shurajiku with a shout, but she calmly prepares to intercept him. Shurajiku quickly subdues the charging man, leaving him groaning on the floor. A burglar tries to use Shoutaru as a shield and threatens him with a knife, but Shurajiku executes a high-standing sweep from her manual. The powerful kick connects with the burglar's face, knocking him away from Shoutaru and sending his weapon flying. Shurajiku pins the final intruder and threatens him with a blade, telling him to go home and never come near the house again. Terrified, the remaining burglars scramble to their feet and flee the premises as Shurajiku watches them go. Shoutaru sits on the floor in shock, struggling to process the incredible display of combat he just witnessed. Shurajiku begins to say something to Shoutaru. Shurajiku looks back and declares that she is the stepmother who will protect Shoutaru. The next morning at 714, Shoutaru wakes up to his alarm, feeling groggy and thinking about a weird dream he just had. Shoutaru sees Shurajiku leaning over him and continues to believe it is just a dream. Shurajiku greets Shoutaru and asks about his shoulder, causing him to jump back in surprise when he realizes she is actually there. Shurajiku attempts to give Shoutaru a morning kiss because her manual says it is necessary, but he frantically refuses. Shoutaru realizes that the events from the night before were real as Shurajiku informs him. It is 7:15, and he has 20 minutes to get ready for school. Shurajiku offers Shoutaru army ration pills for a quick breakfast and offers to help him get dressed, though he insists he can do it faster on his own. Shurajiku presents a bento box with a heart on it, but Shoutaru tells her he is fine since his school has a cafeteria. Shoutaru eventually agrees to take the bento while Shurajiku mulls over what went wrong with her cooking and considers getting ingredients directly from the sea next time. Shoutaru remembers how Shurajiku appeared out of nowhere and fought off the intruders the previous night. Shurajiku serves Shoutaru a blend of Egyptian herbal tea, which he admits tastes good. Shoutaru demands to know who Shurajiku is and how she knows his grandmother, and she prepares to give him an answer. Shurajiku reveals that his grandmother is actually a legendary spy who founded an intelligence agency. Shoutaru spits out his tea and coughs in shock upon hearing that his grandmother is a spy, which Shurajiku calmly confirms. Shoutaru points out that his grandmother is just an ordinary old person who he thought was on holiday, but Shurajiku tells him the important part is about to come. Shurajiku explains that, as the successor to his grandmother's organization, Shoutaru's Life is currently being targeted by people all over the world. Shoutaru asks why he is being targeted and questions the concept of a hereditary spy succession, though Shurajiku tells him not to worry since assassination is a normal part of their business. Shoutaru asks where his grandmother is now, and he is shocked to hear that Shurajiku does not know. Shurajiku recalls his grandmother's final request before disappearing, which was for Shurajiku to protect Shoutaru and raise him so he can defend himself. Shurajiku declares that to protect him from the world, she must become the strongest mother possible. Shoutaru doubts that is what his grandmother meant, but Shurajiku ignores him and vows to protect his life without fail. Shoutaru admits he still doesn't quite understand the situation, as Shurajiku brandishes a knife and promises to make every enemy disappear. Looking at the mess in the house, Shurajiku suggests leaving the cleaning until the next day since it is already late. Shurajiku notices Shouteru's restless state and offers herself as a hugging pillow if he cannot sleep, but he quickly refuses. The next day at school, Shouteru is completely exhausted and sighs heavily because the previous night's events kept him awake. His friend Yuzuo assumes Shouteru has love problems and asks for an introduction if he is seeing an older lady or a married woman. Shouteru realizes he cannot reveal the truth about a mysterious beauty calling herself his stepmother and tells his friend not to get his hopes up. Yuzuo wonders if Shouteru is being bullied or if he really is living with a mature woman, which Shouteru loudly denies. Shouteru finds Yuzuo's obsession annoying, but his friend tells him to reach out if anything goes wrong. Yuzuo claims he is comfortable with women significantly older than himself, but Shouteru points out that would be illegal. A voice interrupts to announce that homeroom is about to begin. The teacher enters and tells the class to sit down, mentioning an important handout for their parents. The students wonder if it is about an upcoming school trip. The teacher clarifies that the handout is actually regarding an upcoming parent-teacher meeting. The teacher tells the students to quiet down and explains that communicating with parents is vital for planning their future paths after high school. The teacher announces she will distribute the forms in alphabetical order and ends homeroom. Shouteru feels the meeting has been announced very suddenly. The teacher pulls Shouteru aside to acknowledge his difficult situation at home, while also warning the class to be careful on their way back because of suspicious people in the area. The teacher offers to hold the meeting with Shouteru alone if his grandmother is unavailable, and he thanks her as he prepares to leave. Shurajiku welcomes Shouteru home and tries to help him undress, but he refuses. He feels bad for his teacher, but decides to keep pretending that he is living entirely alone. While Shouteru is away, Shurajiku cleans the house and discovers the notice for the parent-teacher meeting. She consults her manual to understand the purpose of such a gathering. Shurajiku realizes that Shouteru still does not see her as his mother since he did not tell her about the meeting. Shurajiku vows to use everything in her manual to make Shouteru accept her role in his life. A brief transition marks the passage of time before Shouteru returns from school. Shouteru arrives home and notices how much cleaner the house has become. Shurajiku welcomes him and asks for his clothes, but he tries to decline. Shurajiku suddenly tackles Shouteru to the floor, causing him to cry out in confusion. Shurajiku claims she is trying to fix a hole in his clothes to prevent poisonous insects from getting in, though Shouteru argues they are not in a jungle, and she is only making the tear worse. Shurajiku tells Shouteru that all his clothes are in the wash and offers to bring him some spares. Shurajiku begins to take off her own shirt and offers her clothes for him to wear, but Shouteru tells her to stop stripping and insists he is fine with what he has on. Shouteru is lying in bed later that evening when Shurajiku enters his room, causing him to tell her not to barge in so suddenly. Shurajiku notices that Shouteru seems tired and asks if he would like a massage while holding a bottle of oil. Shouteru is hesitant, but Shurajiku claims that her work has made her very knowledgeable about the human body, which Shouteru finds frightening. Shurajiku explains that she has experience with anatomical methods used to help agents recover from exhaustion in a fraction of the usual time, and Shouteru reluctantly gives in. Shurajiku pours the oil and begins the massage, causing Shouteru to remark on how cold it feels. Shouteru cries out and tells Shurajiku to stop when she begins pressing on his lower back and hips. Shurajiku explains that the area is painful because many lymph vessels are concentrated there, as Shouteru continues to groan. Shouteru finds the experience overwhelming and struggles to control his voice as the massage continues. Shouteru asks if this really is a massage, and Shurajiku admits that she made some adjustments to the technique. Shurajiku reveals she used a questionable book as a reference, causing Shouteru to realize with a scream that his friend Yuzuo must have left it at the house. Shurajiku asks if Shouteru is feeling better, but he tells her that he is actually breaking out in a weird sweat instead. Shouteru lies face down and sighs, feeling like his fatigue has multiplied, and his brain cannot keep up with the situation. Shurajiku leans over Shouteru and offers to sing him a lullaby if he cannot sleep, leaving him worried about how much more his body can handle. Shouteru screams and asks Shurajiku why she is in his bed. She explains that sleeping together is essential skinship for a mother and child to build trust, but he tells her to stop it immediately. Shouteru demands to know why she is so obsessed with being a mother. Shurajiku quotes her manual about skin contact and reveals she found the parent-teacher meeting notice in the trash, which leaves Shoutaru in total disbelief. Shoutaru expresses his frustration with her constant reliance on manuals for everything. He suggests that she should try using her own parents as an example instead of always referring to a book. After a brief silence, Shurajiku admits that Shoutaru is right, but notes that he has touched on a very sensitive subject for her. Shurajiku confesses that everything she knows comes from books because she never had any family of her own to use as an example. Shurajiku excuses herself and says she will leave the room right away. Shoutaru is left speechless as he watches her walk out the door. Shoutaru sits alone in his room looking conflicted and guilty after their exchange. Shoutaru lies in bed trying to convince himself that he wasn't wrong to say what he did, though he remains bothered by her admission of having no family. Feeling restless and frustrated with himself, Shoutaru eventually gives up on his thoughts and tries to go to sleep. Later, Shoutaru runs through the streets at night panting and wondering why he is being forced to chase after someone so fast. He spots a figure ahead and calls out a greeting thinking it is Shurajiku. Two police officers stop Shoutaru and question why a student is out so late asking if his parents are home. Shoutaru gets nervous worrying about the legality of his grandmother's work and the risks if it becomes public knowledge. Shoutaru claims his family is away on holiday. One of the officers dismisses the need for further questioning, calling Shoutaru a skinny brat and telling his partner to just move on. The officer suddenly pulls a gun and presses it against Shoutaru's head, suggesting to his partner that they stop talking and just kill him. Shoutaru freezes in terror at the sudden turn of events. A fork suddenly stabs into the officer's hand, causing him to drop the gun. Shurajiku appears in the street with groceries and remarks that the enemies have already managed to track them down. Shurajiku immediately moves in to attack the fake officers. One of the men realizes that Shoutaru has a guard protecting him as she begins to overpower them. Shurajiku ignores a direct hit to her back as she asks Shoutaru if he is injured. Shurajiku calls her attackers pathetic and delivers a high vertical kick that slams into one of the officers. One of the men curses at her as Shurajiku drops low to the ground to dodge their strikes. Shurajiku gets right in an attacker's face and stares him down with a cold expression. Recalling a move from her manual, Shurajiku wraps a thin wire around the man's throat and pulls it tight. Shurajiku decides she cannot earn trust by only relying on a manual as she continues to strangle the officer. The fight ends as the enemy collapses and Shurajiku stands over him. Shoutaru calls out to her and rushes over. Shurajiku pulls Shoutaru into a sudden tight embrace and tells him she is sorry. She admits that she ignored his feelings despite how worried he must be about his family's sudden disappearance. Shoutaru looks up at her and asks why she is still protecting him after he said such insensitive things to her. Shurajiku explains that she once had no name, no family, and no reason to stay alive. She says his grandmother saved her and many other children without expecting anything back simply because it was the right thing to do. That was the first time she ever felt kindness, and she became determined to repay that debt. Shurajiku explains that being asked to protect what was most important to the grandmother was the first time she felt truly relied upon. She tells Shoutaru that meeting him changed her perspective, and now she protects him because she wants to be his real mother. Shurajiku turns and asks if they should finally head back home. Shoutaru brings up the upcoming parent-teacher meeting and asks her to attend. He admits that while he still cannot call her his mother, he finally understands that she truly cares about him. Shurajiku addresses him by name and thanks him for the invitation, while Shoutaru looks at her with a blush. As they walk through the neighborhood at night, Shoutaru asks if she was actually planning on leaving earlier. Shurajiku clarifies that she was only going to the convenience store to look for local recipes not found in her manual. Shoutaru gets flustered and tells her not to phrase things in such a misleading way. Elsewhere, a blonde woman arrives at a station and complains about how complicated the train maps are in Japan. Nearby students whisper to each other about how pretty she is and wonder if she is a professional model. The woman looks at a photograph of Shoutaru and promises to protect him. Shoutaru reflects on how he suddenly has a stepmother and how his grandmother was secretly the world's strongest spy. He acknowledges that his life is now a target because he is the successor to his grandmother's legacy. Shurajiku tells him not to worry because she will protect him as his mother, though Shoutaru remains skeptical. On his way to school, Shoutaru feels weighed down by the fact that the parent-teacher meeting is scheduled for the next day. He worries that Shurajiku does not actually understand what a parent-teacher meeting entails, despite him being the one who asked her to come. He imagines Shurajiku walking through the school halls in her maid uniform, realizing she would stand out way too much and draw unwanted attention from people like Yuzuo. Shoutaru anticipates a classmate, accusing his stepmother of being a fictional character, while his teacher tries to avoid judging her by her appearance. Walking through the city, Shoutaru tries to convince himself that he made this choice on his own. He hopes that the trust he has built with his teachers will be enough to keep his reputation stable regardless of his unusual home life. Shoutaru pumps his fist and marches forward, telling himself that he can handle the situation. Shoutaru trips over something in the street and loses his footing. He lets out a cry of surprise as he tumbles forward at high speed. Shoutaru slams headfirst into a blonde woman's chest and groans that it hurts. He realizes what happened and panics, immediately backing away and apologizing profusely. Shoutaru asks if the woman is okay while she groans on the ground. She suddenly reaches out and grabs him. The woman looks up with a dazed expression and weakly asks for water. Back at a house, Shoutaru hands her a bottle of water to help her recover. The woman drinks the water greedily while Shoutaru thinks to himself that he brought her home without thinking. He asks if she wants more to drink. The woman suddenly lunges forward and grabs his shirt, calling him by name. She stares at him intensely with a flushed face and begins to speak. She pulls Shoutaru into a close embrace and kisses his forehead, telling him it is all okay and that she will protect him. Shoutaru yells and asks what she is doing while she tells him not to get embarrassed. She smiles and tells Shoutaru that she is his mother. A knife suddenly flies through the air past his head. The knife thuds into the wall, causing Shoutaru to scream. The blonde woman asks the attacker what they are doing, while Shurajiku appears and asks why she is there. The blonde woman looks back and says she knew Shurajiku would be there. The blonde woman dismisses Shurajiku, telling her that she can leave now that her replacement has arrived. Shurajiku retorts that the blonde woman should be the one to go home since nobody invited her. Shoutaru looks on with total confusion. The blonde woman holds up a document and claims that their master also specifically requested for her to be here. Shoutaru recognizes his grandmother's handwriting on the paper as the woman tells him to call her Kind Mama from now on. Kind explains that their grandmother has multiple disciples and that there is no rule against him having more than one stepmother. Shoutaru is stunned by the logic. Kind pulls Shoutaru into an embrace and tells him to pick her if he only wants one mother. Shurajiku gets angry and asserts that she is actually the stronger one. Kind suggests that Shoutaru would prefer a stronger parent and continues to hug him. Shurajiku tells her to stop because he is clearly uncomfortable. Shurajiku calls the comparison between them nonsensical. Kind challenges Shoutaru to pick a favorite and repeats that she is stronger, which Shurajiku denies. Kind lifts Shoutaru into her arms and claims she has a record of 99 wins to Shurajiku's 97. Shurajiku argues that those extra wins came from a surprise attack and a speed-eating contest. Shurajiku argues that strength is not the only quality a mother needs and calls Kind crude. Kind counters that overprotective parents are disliked, and it is better to let a boy have his freedom. A heavy, intense silence falls as both women glare at each other while Shoutaru stands between them, sweating and nervous. Kind asks Shoutaru if Shurajiku is too stiff for him and promises she would ignore any adult books she found in his room. Shoutaru thinks the subject is unfortunately timely. Shurajiku tells Kind that she can hear her and criticizes her needless retorts. Kind asserts that she is not just talking. Kind flexes her arm and says she is perfectly willing to have a match with Shurajiku to settle things. The two women face off closely to decide who is truly fit to be Shoutaru's mother. Shurajiku tells her to bring it on. Shoutaru yells at the two women to stop as they both drop into combat stances. He is completely overwhelmed by their sudden hostility toward each other. The fight begins as Shurajiku launches a series of high-speed kicks. Kind defends herself with precise movements as they exchange a flurry of blows. Shoutaru screams for them to give him a break while the two martial artists continue their relentless exchange. They ignore his pleas and focus entirely on their duel. Kind notes that Shurajiku has become stronger since they last met. She prepares a heavy counter-strike while Shurajiku braces for the impact. Kind throws a powerful punch that misses Shoutaru and smashes a large hole into the wall. Shoutaru stares at the damage in terror, realizing the house is being destroyed. Shurajiku admits that she cannot win through brute force alone against Kine's raw power. Kine laughs confidently as she prepares her next attack. Shurajiku suddenly uses a grappling technique to force Kine toward the ground. Kine is caught off guard and shouts that Shurajiku is cheating by using such tactics. Kine continues to yell about the unfair move as she is thrown through the air. Shoutaru watches the chaos with his mouth hanging open in shock. Kine hits the floor hard while Shurajiku pins her down. Shoutaru lets out a muffled scream at the intensity of the takedown. Shurajiku calls out Shoutaru's name while maintaining her grip. She remains focused on the struggle, determined to prove her superiority. Kine warns that she will no longer hold back if Shurajiku intends to play dirty. She begins to exert her massive strength to break free from the hold. Kine stands up and declares she is going all out. Shoutaru grovels on the floor, complaining that things have gone way too far before finally collapsing face down in defeat. Shoutaru reaches his limit and screams at both women to cut it out immediately. The sudden outburst causes both Shurajiku and Kine to freeze in their tracks. The two women look around and finally notice the complete wreckage they have made of the living room. Furniture is smashed and debris is scattered everywhere. Silence falls over the ruined apartment as the weight of the situation finally sinks in for everyone present. Shoutaru looks around and asks where Kine went. Shurajiku grumbles that Kine left again without helping at all despite her claims of being a better mother. Shoutaru suggests she might just be tired from collapsing earlier. Shoutaru assumes Kine will show up as soon as she gets hungry. He decides to go find her, noting that Shurajiku actually prepared a meal for her despite all her complaining. Shoutaru walks through the house calling out to let Kine know that dinner is ready. Hearing a strange noise, Shoutaru nervously peeks through a doorway. He worries that it might be another intruder or an assassin. Kine stands in a room completely soaked, pulling up her shirt as water drips off her. Shoutaru is speechless and shocked at the sight of Kine standing there dripping wet. Shoutaru screams and asks what Kine is doing in the backyard pond. She calmly replies that she is just washing herself. Shoutaru asks why she isn't using the bathtub. Kine explains she handles heat poorly, but Shoutaru tells her to put on clothes since it is already cold. Kine claims she is wearing clothes, and Shoutaru tells her not to try and distract him. Kine tries to pull Shoutaru into the pond with her telling him he needs it to grow strong. Shoutaru refuses, complaining about the cold and her outdated sense of hygiene. Kine suddenly grabs Shoutaru and pulls him into a very close hug, catching him off guard. Shoutaru is pressed tightly against Kine as he struggles to comprehend what is happening. Kine has a sudden realization and pulls her shirt up even further, offering a clearer view to the stunned Shoutaru. Shoutaru's brain completely stops working as he stares. He recalls that while his mother was strong, there was more to her than just power. Kine declares that she finally understands what she was missing as she smothers Shoutaru in a tight embrace. Kine calls the interaction skinship with a mother as Shurajiku bursts into the room and demands to know what is going on. Shoutaru makes muffled noises of distress, wondering why this is happening to him. Shurajiku asserts that she will be the one taking care of Shoutaru and tells Kine that her idiocy will transfer to him. Kine complains that she could do a better job. Shurajiku brings up the parent-teacher meeting tomorrow, which confuses Kine. Shoutaru explains that the meeting is for parents and teachers to discuss a student's future. Kine stares at him with an uninterested expression, prompting Shoutaru to ask why she is acting that way after asking about it. Shurajiku asks Shoutaru to practice their responses one more time, and he agrees. Later at school, the bell rings to signal the start of the day. Shoutaru recalls practicing every possible question and answer with Shurajiku using a laptop. He feels overwhelmed with worry about leaving Kine home alone and whether the meeting will go smoothly. While sitting in his classroom, Shoutaru hears a noise in the hallway and realizes that Shurajiku must have arrived for the meeting. Shurajiku walks down the school hallway dressed in a formal professional outfit. Shoutaru feels relieved that she seems to have made it safely. Kine suddenly appears right behind Shurajiku wearing a revealing casual outfit. Shoutaru is completely horrified by her choice of clothing and yells in shock. Shurajiku looks away in shame as Kine poses cheerfully for the start of the dramatic parent-teacher meeting. The teacher reviews Shoutaru's files at her desk. She notes that his parents are absent and he currently lives with his grandmother. The teacher looks over Shoutaru's career survey form. She acknowledges that his grandmother is responsible, but suspects she might be over-involved in his personal life. The teacher contemplates how considerate she should be during the meeting. She worries about overstepping into his family affairs while remaining mindful of his situation. There is a sudden knock on the classroom door. The teacher looks up and tells the visitors to please come in. The teacher's eyes go wide and her jaw drops in pure shock at who walks through the door. Earlier that morning, Shurajiku presents her new professional look to Shoutaru. He tells her the clothes look unique on her. Shoutaru then heads off to school hoping everything will go well. Before leaving, Shurajiku leaves Kine gagged and tied up with ropes on the floor. She looks at the clock and notes that it is almost time to head to the school. Shurajiku tells the bound Kine to stay put until she returns from the meeting. Kine easily slips out of her restraints and follows Shurajiku to the school in a trench coat and hat, observing that she has finally found the building. Kine tosses aside her coat to reveal a short school uniform and announces it is time to sneak in. Shurajiku asks what she is doing. Shoutaru panics while Shurajiku points out that the outfit is incredibly embarrassing and out of place. Kine is shocked and insists that it was a perfect disguise. Shurajiku demands that Kine change immediately, but Kine argues that she looks amazing in the uniform as they walk through the busy hallway. Students stare in surprise as the two women walk together, one in professional attire and the other in a skimpy schoolgirl outfit. Kine shouts a cheerful greeting as they arrive at the classroom. Shoutaru is mortified by the loud entrance. Shoutaru panics and pulls both women aside, telling them he needs to talk to them for a second before the meeting starts. Shoutaru begs for this to be a dream while Shurajiku apologizes and explains that Kine must have followed her secretly. Kine ignores the tension and asks if he is happy to see her, which makes Shoutaru even more upset. Kine poses and asks how she looks, explaining she wore the uniform because she is bad with formal clothes. Shoutaru struggles to argue with her logic, while Shurajiku tells Kine to just stay quiet during the actual meeting. Kine suggests going around the school to tell everyone to be nice to Shoutaru. He wonders if bringing her into the meeting is less risky than letting her wander alone. The teacher calls for him to enter. Shoutaru begs them to stay silent and not say anything strange. Kine tells him not to worry, and Shurajiku promises she won't let him be embarrassed. Shoutaru is sandwiched between the two tall women as they walk into the room, making him look incredibly flustered and small. The teacher looks at them in shock and asks who they are. Shurajiku introduces herself as his stepmother, while Kine simply calls herself his mama. The teacher is confused because she thought he only lived with his grandmother. Shurajiku clarifies that she was just recently appointed as his stepmother. The teacher attempts to be understanding of the modern age of diversity, but asks what kind of relationship the two mothers actually. Shoutaru realizes she is having a massive misunderstanding of the situation. The teacher asks about Shoutaru's life outside of school. Shurajiku assures her that she takes care of absolutely everything for him. The teacher grows more confused and wonders why Kine is wearing a school uniform. Shoutaru begs Shurajiku not to make the misunderstanding worse. The teacher notes that Shoutaru has yet to fill out his career survey. Shurajiku claims he will be a key figure in their organization in the future, which alarms the teacher. Shoutaru quickly clarifies that she means the company his grandmother works at. The teacher concludes that his future must be secure. Kine yells that Shoutaru doesn't need to work because she will provide for him. Shoutaru tries to protest, while Shurajiku flatly rejects Kine's plan. The teacher wonders why Kine is being so overprotective. Shurajiku insults Kine's ability to take proper care of Shoutaru. Kine argues there is nothing wrong with him having an easy life. The teacher tries to calm the two women down as Shoutaru becomes more distressed while sandwiched between them. Kine shouts that she will take care of Shoutaru until she dies. Shurajiku counters by saying she will simply live longer than Kine to ensure she is the one taking care of him. Shoutaru struggles as he is squished between the two women. The teacher suggests they should listen to Shoutaru's opinion, but both women tell her not to butt into family matters. Shoutaru appears to be in physical pain while the teacher tries to intervene. As the teacher reaches toward them, Shurajiku suddenly strikes her. Shurajiku delivers a forceful blow to the teacher's back, knocking her forward. The teacher falls to the floor and loses consciousness. Shoutaru, Shurajiku, and Kine stand over her motionless body. Shurajiku apologizes, claiming she acted out of habit. Shoutaru screams at her, questioning what kind of parent attacks a teacher by instinct. Kine suggests destroying all the evidence and preparing a body double with plastic surgery. Shoutaru panics and reminds them both that the teacher is still alive. Shoutaru notices a smoky smell and looks out the window to see a fire. He yells in shock as flames erupt nearby. A massive pillar of fire rises outside the school building. Kine mentions seeing students baking potatoes earlier, but Shoutaru argues that burning leaves shouldn't have caused such a disaster. Shoutaru looks back and forth in total confusion. He struggles to process the massive fire outside while his teacher lies unconscious on the floor. Shoutaru panics upon seeing that a tree has caught fire outside. Kine yawns and assumes the fire will just go out on its own, but Shurajiku doubts that will happen. Shurajiku and Kine decide to take action and begin removing their outer layers. While supporting the unconscious teacher, Shoutaru asks what they are planning to do, and Shurajiku tells him to find a safe place to wait. Standing ready by the window, the two women declare that they are going to fight the fire together. Shurajiku and Kine leap out of the classroom window and head toward the blaze. Shoutaru watches them go and resolves to find a way to help as well. Shoutaru runs across the campus, hoping that the two women are doing all right. Shoutaru enters a storage area and hears someone outside calling for help with buckets to extinguish the fire. He shouts back that he is coming to assist. As Shoutaru moves to exit the shed, he hears a clicking sound and stops in surprise. Outside, the group continues to throw water on the massive pillar of fire to no avail. They regret that their attempt to cook potatoes has turned into such a disaster. Shurajiku prepares a powerful maneuver from her manual, known as the string vise. Kine joins the assault with a high dusting sweep technique, delivering a massive kick toward the flames. The force of their combined attacks creates a powerful shockwave that strikes the center of the blaze. The fire is extinguished in an instant, but the entire tree has been obliterated, leaving only a stump. The students watching are left in total shock. Bystanders question what just happened and wonder if they are in a dream. Shurajiku and Kine decide the matter is settled and head back to the classroom before they are seen. As they walk back toward the school building, Shurajiku pauses and looks back, sensing that something is missing. Shoutaru struggles with the door of the storage shed and realizes he has been locked inside. He bangs on the door and yells for someone to let him out. Shoutaru starts to feel sick and wonders what the strange smell filling the room is. He suspects chemicals are being used and panics at the thought of an assassin attacking him inside the school. He realizes there are no windows to escape through, and his phone is still in the classroom. He begins to feel faint from the fumes. Shoutaru collapses to his knees and blames his own uselessness for trying to act on his own. He weakly knocks on the door as the room fills with smoke. He calls out for Shurajiku and Kine to help him as he loses consciousness. Shurajiku and Kine suddenly burst through the door with a powerful kick. They rush into the storage room and find Shoutaru coughing on the floor. Shurajiku asks if he is all right. Shoutaru apologizes for causing more trouble when he was only trying to help. He weakly asks the two women if they are okay. Shurajiku tells him he isn't a bother and that they are protecting him because they want to. Shoutaru expresses a wish to be stronger so he won't be a burden anymore. Kine excitedly offers to start training him tomorrow, while Shurajiku tells him he will eventually be strong enough to break iron doors. Shoutaru protests that he doesn't want that kind of strength. A dark figure watches them from a distance. The group heads home from the school. Shoutaru tells Kine not to cling so closely to him as Shurajiku walks behind them. The teacher wakes up in the infirmary feeling strangely refreshed. Another staff member asks if she is feeling okay. The school doctor suggests she might be drinking too much coffee and mentions she apparently received a massage from a parent. The teacher realizes her shoulder pain is gone despite the feeling of danger she experienced earlier. Shoutaru reflects on the sudden situation of having two stepmothers at once. He recalls how his grandmother went missing on holiday and sent the stepmothers to him. After learning his grandmother was a master spy, Shoutaru resolves to get strong enough to protect himself from those targeting him as her successor. Shurajiku holds up a knife and tells Shoutaru that she will be teaching him basic self-defense today. Standing out in the yard, Shurajiku explains that they will start by using the knife. Shoutaru pretends to look forward to it while questioning her extreme logic. Shurajiku shows Shoutaru how to hold the weapon and tells him to throw it as fast as he can. She then demonstrates the action by hurling the knife herself. Shurajiku points to a pile of rubble where a wall used to be and says that any opponent will be demolished just like that. Shoutaru realizes he can never achieve such a result. Kine watches from a balcony and calls Shurajiku a sloppy teacher, advising her to match Shoutaru's beginner pace. Shurajiku tells her to keep her opinions to herself. Kine decides that they must focus on building Shoutaru's stamina first. Shoutaru is relieved that she finally suggested something reasonable. Kine announces they will start with a light set of 1,000 squats. Shoutaru yells that there is no way he can do that many. Shoutaru collapses from exhaustion, while Kine tells him there are still 960 left to go. Both women watch him and begin to wonder if they might actually be bad at teaching. Shoutaru lies face down on the sofa and regrets asking the two women for help. The doorbell rings, and he realizes a delivery has arrived. Shoutaru finds a massive cardboard box at the door and wonders if it belongs to Kine. When he opens it, a thick cloud of smoke pours out. A girl with twin tails slowly rises from inside the packing material. Shoutaru is stunned to find a human being was delivered in the box. The girl sits in the open box and looks out with a neutral expression. The girl asks what time it is, and Shoutaru informs her that it is 12:30. She notes that she has arrived 12 minutes later than originally planned. The girl suddenly moves very close to Shoutaru's face, catching him completely off guard. The girl examines Shoutaru and refers to him as her new test subject, before deciding she should call him her new son instead. The girl decides to get started immediately. She explains that she needs to take measurements and collect samples of all of Shoutaru's bodily fluids. Shoutaru is confused by the terms son and test subject. The girl pins Shoutaru down. Suddenly, Asako opens the door and asks Shoutaru if he knows where her panties are. Asako is shocked by the scene and demands to know what they are doing. Shoutaru calls out to Kine for help. The girl dismisses the insult as a compliment, while Shoutaru calls her a pervert and asks the other two if they know her. Kine and Asako watch the situation with disbelief. The girl introduces herself as Kurumi and changes into a sweater. Asako warns Shoutaru not to trust her and questions why a researcher like her has come to the house. Kurumi reveals she received a letter from Asako and couldn't decline the request. Shoutaru is frustrated that another person was invited via a letter, while Kine warns that the woman is a dangerous, mad scientist from their organization. Kurumi claims she is performing high-level research beyond what simpletons can understand. Asako mentions rumors of crazy human transmutation experiments, while Kine tells Kurumi that she is a weird shut-in who could never be a mother. Kurumi explains that she views her test subjects as her children and intends to dote on Shoutaru. Kine expresses surprise that Kurumi is actually interacting with others for a mission. Asako accuses Kurumi of wanting to take advantage of Shoutaru. Shoutaru tells her not to phrase it that way, while Kine wonders why their master invited such a dangerous person. Kurumi admits she is interested in Shoutaru's body because she wants to research Asako's genes, which she could never obtain before. Shoutaru is alarmed by her interest in his body. Kurumi marvels at the chance to get samples from Asako's grandson. Shoutaru insists he is just a normal student and that his grandmother was a normal person, but no one listens to him. Kine argues that Shoutaru has schoolwork and no time for Kurumi's research. Shoutaru agrees, but Kurumi seems confused by the concept of schoolwork. Kurumi is shocked to learn that Asako's grandson actually attends school. Kurumi stares at Shoutaru in silence for a moment. Shoutaru confirms that he does indeed go to school. Kurumi dismisses the topic and announces that she is going to set up her laboratory. Shurajiku admits to Shoutaru that she has no idea what Kurumi is thinking. Asako watches the strange woman walk away and remarks on how weird she is. During dinner, Shoutaru asks if Kurumi is going to eat with them. Asako tells him to leave her alone because she does not get along with other people, while Shurajiku serves him more food. Shoutaru finishes his meal and thanks the women for the food. Asako tells him to go ahead and take a bath before any of them use it. Shoutaru settles into the bath and relaxes, happy to finally be alone. His peace is immediately interrupted when Kurumi suddenly appears in the room with him. A startled Shoutaru demands to know why she is there. Kurumi explains that she is not getting in the water, but she tells him to let her know next time if he wants to bathe first. Shoutaru asks her to please leave the room, but Kurumi tells him not to mind her presence. Shoutaru finds it impossible not to be bothered by her standing right there. Kurumi ignores his protests and reaches toward the tub with a glass vial stating that she just wants a little sample. Shoutaru panics and tries to move away from her. Shoutaru accidentally splashes water all over Kurumi and immediately apologizes. He explains that he only reacted that way because she reached out so suddenly. Kurumi looks down at her soaked clothes and tells Shoutaru that he will need to take responsibility for what he did. Shoutaru is left completely confused by her statement. While Shoutaru cowers in the bathtub, Kurumi begins performing a chemical experiment right next to him. She is delighted by the reaction she sees inside her test tube. Later that night, Shoutaru rests in his room and thinks about how difficult his life has become. He was already struggling to keep up with the first two women, but now he has to deal with a third one who does not listen to him at all. Shoutaru spots Kurumi outside through his window and wonders what she is doing in the yard. He realizes that all three of his roommates are strange, but he decides to just go to sleep so he can be ready for school tomorrow. Shoutaru wakes up the next morning to find Kurumi leaning over him while wearing a surgical mask. She calmly wishes him a good morning as he shouts in surprise. Shoutaru realizes he is restrained in a chair and asks where he has been taken. Kurumi looks back from her desk and informs him that he is currently in her laboratory. When Shoutaru asks what is going on, Kurumi continues typing on her computer and explains that she must control every variable for her experiments. She tells him there is no longer any need for him to leave the room. Kurumi tells Shoutaru that she will provide him with the best education and take full control over his body, including his meals and exercise. She says that if he wants her to be his mother, she will love him like a real one. Shoutaru asks what she is doing. A woman in a white t-shirt calls out for Shoutaru nearby. Kurumi leans in close to Shoutaru and promises to love him. The woman in the t-shirt triggers a trap in the house and compares the building to a ninja mansion. A maid tells her not to shout because she will disturb the neighbors. The woman trips another trap that fires needles at her. She asks the maid what is happening, but the maid claims that the incident was not on purpose. The maid explains that Shoutaru is likely in the laboratory Kurumi built in the garden overnight. The woman in the t-shirt wonders how she managed to build it so quickly. The maid accidentally triggers another trap near the woman. The woman asks if she is trying to take her out on purpose, but the maid denies it. Kurumi presents a bowl of food and says it is time for breakfast. She explains that the meal has all the nutrients a child needs to grow up healthy. Shoutaru says the food does not look good. Kurumi remembers that his hands are bound and acknowledges the situation. Kurumi tells Shoutaru that she will feed the meal to him. Shoutaru reacts with confusion. Kurumi feeds Shoutaru from a bottle and asks him if the food is surprisingly good. Shoutaru is flustered and asks what is going on. Kurumi says the food is tasty and prepares for a health check. Shoutaru asks to be released so he can go to school, but Kurumi asks him why he needs to go. Kurumi asks Shoutaru if he wants to be like Asako. Shoutaru thinks about his past experiences with her and says he does not really want to be like her. Kurumi admits that Asako is a greater genius than she is. She tells Shoutaru that since he inherited those genes, he could lead their organization or the entire world if he wished. Shoutaru finds the claim hard to believe. Shoutaru explains that despite Kurumi's claims, Asako is just a normal family member to him. Kurumi concludes that being normal is Asako's secret and asks Shoutaru to teach her about it. Shoutaru notes that Asako is actually quite scary. Kurumi leans over Shoutaru and describes the concept of a normal family. Kine kicks the door open and yells for Shoutaru. Kine complains about the door's durability, while Shurajiku checks on Shoutaru's well-being, and Shoutaru calls out their names. Shurajiku addresses Kurumi, as Kurumi calls the newcomers brutes. Shurajiku scolds Kurumi for the state of the house, while Kine mentions the deadly traps they encountered on the way in. Shurajiku orders Kurumi to clean up and leave because her goal of becoming Shoutaru's mother is a major problem as Shoutaru tries to calm them down. Shurajiku and Kine tell Shoutaru to stay out of the argument, even though he points out it is his own home. Shurajiku and Kine argue loudly over Kurumi while she thinks about Asako. Kurumi questions why she was betrayed.